go back to an old talk today. Some of you might have heard it, some of you probably not. But first, there's a disclaimer. I'm not promoting anything. I'm not condoning anything. I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm not suggesting you do anything. Okay? Get that out there. So today we're going to talk about recreational drugs, where they came from. So, first, the definition of a drug. A noun, a medicine or other substance which has physiological effect when ingested or otherwise introduced into the body. Second definition we're going to need is a recreational drug. A drug used non-medically for personal enjoyment. Okay. Now, most anthropologists agree that human drug consumption predates human civilization. The basic timeline that I've been able to put together. The first is the use of cannabis. It is first spoken of in the Vedas. The Vedas are perhaps the oldest written text on our planet today. They date back to the beginnings of the Indian civilization and the earliest records of the Aryan race. They came to us in written form between 4,000 and 6,000 years ago. They are supposed to have been passed through oral tradition for, depending on where you read it, anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000 years before that. So that's a little while ago. Now, archaeologists have found evidence of the cola nut, which is caffeine, tobacco, which is nicotine, khat, which is an ancient amphetamine-like plant, betel nut, and coca at various sites dating back at least 13,000 years. Rock paintings in the Sahara Desert, the works of pre-Neolithic early gatherers in which mushroom effigies are represented repeatedly, produced 7,000 to 9,000 years ago. The earliest cultural evidence of cannabis use originates from the Neolithic era in China, over 6,000 years ago. The oldest evidence of beer consumption dates back to around 5,000 BCE. Excuse me, I'm old. In what is now Iran. While wine consumption goes back even further to about 6,000 BCE. At 5,000 BCE, we have evidence that the Sumerians used opium. 3,000 BC, the approximate date of the supposed origin of the use of tea in China. Recreational use of drugs has been around as long as humans have been here.
Yeah.
Now, we'll get into what different things classify as a recreational drug in a little bit. But according to the study from the Stanford University School of Medicine, the central nervous system has developed certain receptors that indicate co-evolutionary activity between mammalian brains and psychotropic plants. In essence, the human brain has evolved receptor systems for plant substances such as the opioid receptor system, not available by the mammalian body itself. The study notes that common ancestors evolved these receptors at some point in evolutionary history in order to accommodate substance consumption. The study also points towards the body's natural defenses against drug overdose, such as exogenous substance metabolism, where it just flushes it out, and vomiting reflexes, as further evidence for mammalian coevolution with psychotropic plants. As odd as it might seem, this suggests that humans are actually hardwired at this point to enjoy drugs. While coevolution explains why humans can experience drugs, it doesn't explain why humans choose to use drugs despite social stigma against them. Another theory of human drug consumption explores the idea of modern drug experimentation as a form of evolutionary novel behavior. Nobody else is doing it, let's do it. Within the realm of evolutionary psychology, this hypothesis predicts that individuals of higher intelligence are more likely to engage in novel behavior that goes against cultural traditions or social norms. 40-year-long study funded by the British government paralleled this hypothesis. Individuals with IQs above 125 were about twice as likely to have tried psychoactive drugs than individuals with IQs below 75. The quote from there is, "Intelligent people don't always do the right thing, only the evolutionary novel thing." Now, let's think about these people and the fact that they were all drug users, not medicine. Richard Alpert, also known as Baba Ram Das, Marcus Aurelius, Charles Baudelaire, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, William Burroughs, Lewis Carroll, Winston Churchill, Grover Cleveland, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, excuse me, this one's not a surprise, Aleister Crowley, Salvador Dali, that's not really a surprise either, Charles Dickens, Arthur Conan Doyle, Isadora Duncan. Isn't Arthur Conan Doyle, wasn't he knighted?
Yes.
Yes, Sir Arthur Conan.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Sherlock Holmes in the novels did it too.
Thomas Alva Edison, Benjamin Franklin, Sigmund Freud, Jerry Garcia, Jimi Hendrix, Aldous Huxley, yeah, some of them you can figure. William James, Thomas Jefferson, Steve Jobs, Janis Joplin, John Keats, Ken Kesey, John Cunningham Lilly, Bob Marley, Judge Marcotte, Joseph McCarthy, I hate this name, Philippus Aurelius Paracelsus,
Yeah.
I think I got that right, Pablo Picasso, Plotinus, Edgar Allan Poe, Elvis Presley, here's one, Richard Pryor, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Sir Walter Scott, Shelley, Van Gogh, Jules Verne, George Washington. We have knights, presidents, all kinds of people. It is suggested that they may have played an evolutionary role in our mental development. We now know that the flowers associated with Neanderthal burials had psychoactive properties. The first theory, and this is from Leroy and Gourian, there's two I's in a row, I don't know how to do that, in 1984. The first theory is that these psychoactive plants expanded the minds of our ancestors to the point where the brains had to grow to accommodate memory and functions of the new, more complicated mind, thus bringing the emergence of the genus Homo and eventually the species Sapien. Gordon Wasson put forth in his theory on hallucinogenic mushrooms, specifically the Amanita muscaria, was responsible for, and this is a quote, "A prodigious expansion in man's memory must have been the gift that differentiated mankind from his predecessors. And I surmise that this expansion in memory led to the simultaneous growth in the gift of language. These two powers generating in man that self-consciousness, which is the third of the triune traits that alone make man unique. Those three gifts, memory, language, and self-consciousness, so interlock that they seem inseparable. The aspects of a quality that permitted us to achieve all the wonders we now know." Don't let your minds explode quite just yet. A modified version of this theory was later developed by McKenna in the late 1980s. His theory differed from Wasson's in that McKenna believed that the mushrooms containing the ethogen psilocybin, and he says more specifically the Stropharia cubensis, were responsible for the development of memory, language, and self-consciousness. Could be happened over here, happened over here. They had different mushrooms. We don't know. These are theories. And that mushroom was singled out because it was the only species thought to produce psilocybin in concentrated amounts and to be free of other compounds that may produce side effects. And to that, the, how do we say it again? The Amanita muscaria, the psychoactive agents in that mushroom, there are three, and they're all poison. They're also all what you give somebody if they're poisoned with this one. They give them this one to counteract it. All three of them work that way with each other. It's the only reason you don't die when you eat it or ingest it, however. So there can be side effects that aren't good. And I didn't want to be part of the study of the guy who went around with a notebook and a bunch of kids going, "Eat that mushroom." No, he died. Eat that mushroom. Well, he didn't die. What did it taste like? We can use that for food. Okay. That's not a study I wanted to be part of. So, it was the addition to these mushrooms to the diet of early man that led to better eyesight, an advantage for hunters, sex, and language when eaten. McKenna suggested that the mushroom augmented the above traits by changing the behavior of individuals. These changes in behaviors favored increased uses of language, leading to increase in vocabulary to communicate when hunting and gathering. Although evolution was occurring on the genetic level due to the increase in mutations from the change in diet that had occurred, according to McKenna, social evolution due to the mushroom consumption was responsible for these changes. And dead. When taken at levels that cause intoxication, a feeling of ecstasy occurs with hallucinations and access to what the user would perceive as the realm of the supernatural. This led to the origin of the shaman, whose duty it was to communicate with the unseen mind of nature and tell you what's up and what you should do. Okay, so the origin of religion. Could be. Now, since Casey and Lena aren't here to correct me, when Aryans first settled in India, they were predominantly a nomadic people. During the centuries that followed their invasion, they intermarried with the original inhabitants, became farmers, and invented Sanskrit. The collection of 4 holy books called the Vedas tells of daring exploits, their chariot battles, conquest, subjugation of enemy armies, eventually settlement in the land of Indus, and even how their god Shiva brought the marijuana plant down from the Himalayas for their use and enjoyment. Okay. According to their legends, Shiva became enraged over some family squabble and went off by himself in the fields. There, the cool shade of tall marijuana plant brought him a comforting refuge from the torrid rays of the blazing sun. Curious about this plant that sheltered him from the heat, he ate some of the leaves and felt so refreshed that he adopted it as his favorite food. Hence his title, the Lord of Balm. Herodotus wrote of the Scythians, who were also descended from the Aryans, using cannabis for religion and recreation. I won't describe this right because basically it's pretty gross. Wasn't smoked or eaten. Let's just go that way. Then a Russian archaeologist, Professor S.I. Rudenko, made a fantastic discovery at the Pazyryk Valley of central Siberia, a site duplicating the writings of Herodotus, who had also heard of another tribe of nomads who used marijuana for recreational purposes. Speaking of these people, Herodotus states that when they have parties and sit around a fire, they throw some of it into the flames. As it burns, it smokes like incense, and the smell of it makes them drunk, just as wine does. As more fruit is thrown on, they get more and more intoxicated until finally they jump up, start dancing and singing. Professor Mircea Eliade, perhaps the world's foremost authority on the history of religions, has suggested that Zarathustra himself may have been a user of bhanga and relied on its intoxication to bridge the metaphysical gap between heaven and earth. Another religion. One of the few surviving books of the Zend Avesta, called the Vendidad, the law against demons, in fact calls Bhanga Zoroaster or Zarathustra's, Zarathustra's, I won't use that word, good narcotic, and tells of 2 mortals who were transported in soul to the heavens, where upon drinking from the cup of Bhanga, they had the highest mysteries revealed to them. A story is told of a guru named Gobind Singh, the founder of the Sikh religion, which alludes to Bhang's usage in battle. According to one legend, Buddha subsisted on a daily ration of 1 cannabis seed and nothing else during his 6 years of asceticism. Cannabis also held a preeminent place in the Tantric religion, which evolved in Tibet in about the 7th century AD, out of an amalgam of Buddhism and local religion. Tantrism, a word that means that which is woven together, was a religion based on the fear of demons. To combat the demonic threat of the world, the people sought protection in spells, incantations, and formulas, and exorcism of their llamas and in plants such as cannabis, which were set afire to overcome evil forces. It was also an important part of their yoga sex acts.
Yes.
So the fact that we see such widespread use of recreational use today shouldn't really be a surprise. Now, topping the list of recreational drugs used today mostly are sugar, caffeine, nicotine, speaking of caffeine.
Cheers.
There's no sugar in there though. Alcohol, cannabis, methamphetamines, opioids, prescription drugs that are used incorrectly. I mean, the list goes on and on. And yes, coffee, tea, and soda are recreationally used drugs. And you can ingest almost enough of any drug to kill you. As far as I know, that isn't true of only marijuana. So now, why do we have a problem with younger and younger children using drugs? You know, one, it's only been recently that the age of adulthood has been 18 to 21. In the not so distant past, 13 to 14 was considered an adult. 2, kids always want to do what older kids do. It's natural. Older kids want to do what adults do. They see it with us. They want to do it to be older. And as we go along, as 18-year-olds start doing things that adults do, they want to be cool. Then we move that down to 16 a generation later, and we move that down to 14 in another generation, and guess what? Here we sit with some places there are 8-year-olds getting high. Three, anything you just flat out tell anyone they can't do without explaining it and giving them a rational explanation and understanding of why they're not to do it, they're going to do it, if for nothing else but to find out why they're not supposed to. This is true more of children who feel themselves invincible than it is of almost anyone else. Maybe it would be better to be honest with them and explain these things to them instead of treating them like they wouldn't understand. Ignorance is not bliss, and knowledge might actually help them make better decisions. But we can always expect our children and grandchildren to not only emulate us, but to be like us and to do things we did at their age or even younger. If you think about some of the stuff you did as a teenager, you really don't want your kids or grandkids doing. At least I know I'm in that group. I mean, I was 15 when I totaled my first car. Wyatt just drove off for the first time by himself today. Without any of us home to rescue him if something happens. Okay. Knowledge is power, and wisdom comes entirely too late to us. Okay. I'm a little early. Told you not to go so fast. I'll leave you with this. And again, I'm not condoning or promoting anything here. But in 1970, Dr. Albert St. Georgi, Nobel laureate in medicine and physiology, in reply to being asked what he would do if he were 20 today, and this is his quote: "I would share with my classmates rejection of the whole world as it is, all of it. Is there any point in studying and work? Fornication, at least, is something good. What else is there to do? Fornicate and take drugs against the terrible strain of idiots that govern this world."
This is so good.
Thank you.